I want to welcome you to the Harry and Rose Samson Family Jewish Community Center. Jewish Community Relations Council of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation is pleased to sponsor today's educational program. My name is Ellis Bromberg. I'm the chair-elect of the Jewish Community Relations Council and co-chair along with Mickey Pollack of the Candidate Forum Planning Committee. This is an educational and nonpartisan forum, and we strive to be fair and even-handed. We sponsor candidate forums for educational purposes only. We do not support or oppose any candidate. And to that end, we encourage all of you to also attend our second event next Sunday, October 14th. You can see the flyer with Tammy, Baldwin. You can see the flyer at your seat for the details on that. The JCRC of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation serves as the representative voice of the Jewish community on behalf of its public affairs and community relations issues. 29 Jewish organizations, synagogues, and agencies are represented on our board of directors. Our goal this morning is to ask the candidate and the candidates next week as well about their positions on the issues which are of concern to our members and provide an opportunity for the community to hear from the candidates. So it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this morning's program, Ben Merens. Ben is the host of At Issue, a daily current events call-in program which airs statewide on the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio. He's a public speaker whose expertise is the art of listening. He's worked in print and broadcast journalism for 30 years in New York, Chicago, and Milwaukee. He's also taught at Hofstra University, Columbia College, and Concordia University here in Mequon. He holds a master's degree in journalism from Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism and an undergraduate degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Ben and his family live in Milwaukee's North Shore. We're going to turn it over to Ben and to Governor Thompson. Ben, take it.
Thank you, Ellis. Thanks very much. Thanks to all of you for coming out, and mostly Governor. Thanks for making time to be here today. Appreciate it. A couple quick notes for you. We've asked if you've got questions that you write them down. I was asked by somebody 2 questions before we started. One, are we able to ask questions any other way? I said, can you stand up, make a speech, and then get a question there? I said, in this room? No. And the reason for that is we're here today to hear from Governor Thompson, candidate Thompson. We're here to hear.
You gave me an effective mic.
Oh, we did? Well, then I'm going to say Mike to Tammy next week.
I was going to say, you say you're not partisan, but you give me an effective mic to hope you do the same.
I guarantee you now. So we have researched issues that the Federation cares about, and I hope you care about. So that's where the questions I'm going to ask come from. We'll try to have time for your questions as well. I do ask that you write them down. Somebody asked about fact-checking as well. Obviously, without a computer, I'm not going to do it. And if you think something said by either candidate this week or next is not true, I want you to keep that to yourself. Go home, fact-check it on your own, and then use that information when you go to vote. But to call out to candidates today or next week only takes time away from the candidate's voice and your ability to hear from him today and her next week. So I ask you that you allow them to be heard, and if you have a reaction at the end, you have the chance to voice it, hopefully with applause for each candidate for coming here and speaking to you. And the only other request I'll make for you is if you have a cell phone or anything else that will make noise, don't just put on vibrate, turn it off. And realize that you're allowed to disconnect from the outside world for an hour. It's good for you. I actually left mine in my car, and I'm not shaking. It's okay. You don't need it. So with that said, we've got questions this morning on issues of poverty, fiscal management, civility, healthcare, the Constitution, Iran, and Israel. But we're going to start with a couple minutes with you being able to ask the question, why are you running for the Senate?
I'm running because I am a proud American. I love this country. This country's been very good to me. I'm very concerned about the direction this country's going. $16 trillion in debt. $6 trillion in the last 4 years. That's more debt than was accumulated from the time George Washington became president until George H.W. Bush, 212 years. That concerns me, it troubles me. It's on borrowed money. 40% of the money is borrowed. Every Medicare check, every Social Security check, 40 cents is borrowed from China. and/or Russia. That concerns me. It's been done without a budget. Congress has not passed a budget in 3 years and 4 months. I think that's malfeasance in office. And I look at my 3 children and my 8 grandchildren. I look at your children and your grandchildren who have it. We've always in America promised our children and grandchildren that they're going to inherit a country that's stronger, freer, fairer, safer, with more options than what we had. For the first time in the history of our country, we can no longer say that. Instead, we're telling our children, you're going to inherit a country that is going to be laden with debt. We didn't have the courage to stand up and balance the budget, to pay our bills. You have to do it. And each one of those children, born today, born right now, is $50,000 in debt, and is doubling very rapidly. That really bothers me. I do not believe it is fair, and it's unconscionable, to leave that kind of debt to future generations. That's why I'm running. I'm also running because nothing's getting done in Washington. It's stalemate. When I was governor for 14 years, ladies and gentlemen, the Democrats controlled both houses of the legislature for 12 and a half out of the 14 years. I cut taxes 91 times with Democrat support. We had welfare reform, which became the model for the country. We started in Wisconsin with Democrat votes. I was able to start a program in which we were able to encourage businesses to come to Wisconsin and expand. We created 700, with the business community, 742,000 jobs in Wisconsin. The biggest era of growth, prosperity ever in the history of our state was while I was governor. No scandals, no problems. We did it on a bipartisan basis. I've reformed programs. I've come up with innovative ideas. Part D, welfare reform. Programs on Medicaid have become Badger Care, senior care, programs that have become the best programs in the country, were my ideas. That's what's lacking in the federal government, and that's why I'm running.
Governor, the first question I'll ask you about healthcare, as you mentioned. 2010, people in the United States spent over $2.5 trillion in healthcare costs.
2.6 trillion to be exact.
What many roles does the government have in reducing the costs associated with healthcare?
Healthcare is really a huge problem right now. Let me tell you what has to be done. 93%, I know healthcare extremely well. I've studied it. I developed the best healthcare programs in the country with Badger Care and senior care, and Part D for seniors and Medicare. 90% of the seniors, just on a recent survey, said Part D is probably the best program. I was the mastermind and the individual that had the responsibility of getting that passed. So these programs show that I know what I'm talking about in healthcare. Here's what's problems with healthcare. 93% of that $2.6 trillion that I was talking about goes to get people well after they get sick. Only 7% is spent to keep you well in the first place. You're all very learned individuals, you wouldn't be here today. Does anybody think that's smart? I think it's sort of stupid. If you have a car, you change the oil and gas. Change the grease. You keep the motor going. In healthcare, we wait till the motor burns out and we rebuild it. Really done. Chronic illnesses. Illnesses that you and I have some degree of control over cost 75% of the cost of healthcare. Nobody is doing anything about it. I started a program when I was secretary to do something about it. We got to get more individuals involved in their own health care, understanding what chronic illness, because these are illnesses you and I can control. What we have to do is start eating properly, exercising, and not smoking. You know, it's not rocket science, but it has to be done. Third thing we have to do is we have to allow for people to have the opportunity to have competitive health insurance. Right now, you're limited to buying health insurance that are registered within your state. You can buy automobiles, trucks, TVs, anything you want, all over the country. I want you to be able to make a determination what you want in your health insurance policy. Put it up on the web. Allow insurance companies, health insurance companies all over America to bid on it. Then what I want to do is an innovative idea I came up with. Put it up for a reverse bid. Allow the insurance companies to have one last bid, be able to drive down the cost, and you will have more people covered than any time before. The fourth
thing with the federal government to get involved.
No, I want the state and the individuals to do it. The fourth thing I want to do is if you're ugly going into the hospital, ladies and gentlemen, you probably are going to be ugly coming out. You should not be able to sue the doctor in the hospital because you're not beautiful. We got to change the litigation system so that individuals, doctors, and hospitals don't spend billions of dollars protecting themselves from being sued. Number 5, 18% of the cost of that $2.6 trillion, ladies and gentlemen, goes for filling out forms. Several of you are Medicare, I can tell by your age. You know, you go into, you get those statement of economic benefits, remember those statement things? Nobody knows what the heck they are. You got forms like this. You're all nodding your head, you know what I'm talking about. Let's get it down to be a paperless thing in one form. Insurance companies won't like it, but you will save billions of dollars. 1% of the people, 1% of the individuals use up 20% of the cost of health care. These are the individuals that are the sickest Americans. They need a lot of care, and we have to give it to them. But we can provide registered nurses 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and manage care, that individual, give that person better quality of health, which gives that person a better quality of life, and save billions of dollars. 5% of the American people use up 50% of the cost of health care. So these are just ideas that nobody else talks about because nobody really understands healthcare like I do. I'm not saying I'm not bragging. I just, I've lived my whole life in the healthcare arena. I know it. And these are the kinds of programs we have to have, ladies and gentlemen, to make sure that the healthcare system that you have and want is affordable and accessible. My opponent, she wants the government to take over all of healthcare and control the decisions. I want you and the state, not the federal government, to control healthcare.
Every topic we have to be the whole hour's discussion, so we'll move through a bunch of them. And if you have more specific questions, you can contact the campaign, but we'll get you some taste of it.
I know, Ben, but I got it.
No,
I know so much about these subjects. I want to make sure I tell people that, you got a guy that really knows something, okay?
Just like the last time we spoke, there's no commercial interruption. I'm not stopping you for that. The fiscal crisis management issue on the minds of many of us, because we've got a fiscal cliff coming. It'll be reached in January with the elimination of the Bush tax cuts and legally prescribed spending cuts. We're curious about your thoughts about how government should proceed financially in the short term and then in the long term.
Here's what I want to do. I did this when I was governor. I came in as governor of the state of Wisconsin, and the state was in deep financial trouble. And before I even got sworn in as governor, I requested all state agencies to come in with a budget that was 5% less than they got the year before. There was grumbling, but they did it. And you know something? State government never ran better. It was efficient. They led their programs. The federal government, nobody ever looks at existing programs. I know, I was there. I've asked for the power to do it, and they said, no, you don't have it. What I want to do is the same thing in the federal government. I want to come in and request every federal agency to come in at 5% less than they got the year before, across the board, except for the entitlement programs, Medicare and Social Security, but across the board. But give the secretary the power to reorganize the department and get rid of programs that don't work. Because right now, in the federal government, we have budget. And why we're in such financial trouble right now is everybody adds on to the budget. You can get a 1%, a 2%, a 3%, or a 4.5% increase. Nothing ever gets taken away. And a lot of programs have been here for 90 years. Some of those programs can be modernized and changed. Give the secretaries the authority to implement ideas. Get rid of duplicated programs, programs that don't work, and come in and you will save the 5%, and we will start towards the road of fiscal sanity and a balanced budget. And nobody's going to get hurt. It's going to make the federal government, ladies and gentlemen, run better.
How can we afford to exempt the entitlement program?
Because we have to. Because Medicare and Social Security going broke. We have to look at those individually, and I've got ideas on those if you want to get to them.
Yeah, right now.
Well, Medicare, nobody on the other side is ever going to do anything. They're just going to hang around and say, oh, we're going to keep Medicare and Social Security the way it is, and they'll go broke. Medicare, here, let me tell you this, because you'll never hear this from the other side, and you won't pick it up anyplace, but I'll tell you the figures. Like I said, just think of this. The gross national product in America, that's all the goods, services, all the money and everything we make is just shy of $15 trillion. Our debt is $16 trillion, more than our gross national product, which means that the country's in very bad shape. But at the federal level, ladies and gentlemen, you have to look out for 75 years for the unfunded liabilities. Now, the unfunded liabilities for Social Security is about $12 trillion. Now, that we can handle. We can handle that. We're going to have to make some adjustments, but Social Security doesn't start going broke until 2034. We've got plenty of time to take a look at it, protect it, make sure everybody's Social Security is going to be sacrosanct. Medicare, I bet you there isn't anybody here who could give me an idea how big the unfunded liability of Medicare is. Unfunded liabilities of Medicare over 75 years is at a minimum $40 trillion. Maximum $75 trillion. Somewhere in between 40 and 75 trillion. If you only have a gross budget of 14 to 15 trillion dollars, there's no way that you're going to pay off 40 to 75 trillion dollars. Impossible. And Medicare goes broke in the year 2022. That's 10 years from now. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that all the seniors, and what I want to do is I want to protect every senior so they get their Medicare. So every senior in this room, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, across America, gets their Medicare. Second thing, all those that are over 55 in the year 2020 will all get Medicare. No changes. Those in 2020, before it goes broke, are going to have a choice. They're going to have a choice to determine if you want to stay on Medicare, knowing Medicare is going to go broke, or go into the federal, what I call the federal health insurance program. This is where I differ with Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan would have you go into a subsidized commercial insurance, which is fine, which is workable. What I would do is put you into the federal health insurance program, which covers all the congressmen and women, all the senators, and the President of the United States. You make the choice. You know something? It saves Medicare. My idea, and everybody will be covered. You won't hear from anybody else. The other side is just going to say, oh, we're just going to keep Medicare. I just gave you the figures. You can check them out. It's impossible to save Medicare just by letting it go. You've got to come up with some revisions, and when I come up with revisions to save it so that all seniors and all future seniors and all young people are going to be covered. That is what I offer, and that is so different than what my opponent, and so different than what people say, oh, we'll just leave Medicare. You can't leave Medicare because it goes broke. And the seniors who are on Medicare are the ones that are going to get hurt because there won't be anything there if it goes broke. I want to make sure that everybody's protected. That's why my plan is the only plan out there. Well, Paul Ryan's plan is good. My plan is better.
In terms of the long-term financial actions the government has to take, up to 5% budget cuts in the short run, like the entitlement program. If you go over the long term, if there's any chance of getting the debt down, or do you not think it needs to?
Well, first of all, we've got to grow the economy. Let me tell you how I grow the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, there's over $1 trillion. I want you to listen to this. There's over $1 trillion. Could be $3 trillion. Somewhere between $1 and $3 trillion. Money that companies in Milwaukee have made in other countries. They've invested in businesses in other countries. They've made, you know, like, figure out anyone. John Deere down here bought out companies. It's got offices all over the world. It's got manufacturing concerns all over the world. They've made money in those places. And they've got money there. And they pay taxes in those states. It's called a territorial tax. And so it pays taxes in the state where they're located. Pays the country where they're located. But they got trillions of dollars of money that could come home to the United States. You know why they don't bring it home? Because after they paid the taxes in the country where they are, the United States puts another tax on them at 35%. Now, do you know any smart company that's in business, that's already paid their taxes where they're located, is going to come back to the United States and pay another 35%? No. The United States Treasury will never get that money. So here's what we do. We get rid of the 35% penalty and say you can only bring the money back if you invest in people, jobs, plants, and equipment. It would be, ladies and gentlemen, the largest stimulus ever. Largest stimulus was under Obama, was $864 billion, and it failed. This is $1 trillion plus stimulus, not run by the government, but run by private companies investing in people, plants, and equipment. It would be the biggest stimulus, biggest job creator we've ever seen in America. And it's there. All we have to do is use common sense, my idea, and get it done. And we make things happen for the good of every individual that's unemployed or underemployed, and creates the biggest stimulus we've ever had, ladies and gentlemen.
Topic of poverty, Governor. Campaigns and candidates spend a lot of time talking about the values and the importance of building a strong middle class in America. There's good reason for it, obviously, but there's never much addressing the issues and discussing poverty, because we don't ask you that much about it. But can you talk about your vision of the federal role in addressing the needs of families who live in poverty, of disabilities, of those two issues?
Well, take a look at my record. I came in and I passed three income tax rate reductions, giving poor people an exemption. Number two, I went to the welfare mothers of our state. And I said, you know, I don't like the fact that you're locked into poverty. And they said, we don't either. I said, what can I do to get you a job? They said, well, we need health care. We need daycare. I dropped out of school when I was 14. I need some vocational training. And I need some transportation to work. And I said, if I provide for those things, well, will you go to work? They said, absolutely. And so I provided those things for poor mothers. And we had 100,000 families on welfare. And we reduced it down to 5,000 before I left to go to Washington. The biggest reduction ever. And it passed, became the law of the land for poor people to have an opportunity to get out of poverty and have a job. Bill Clinton at the Democratic National Convention said, you know, the welfare law, he didn't give me credit even though he stole my plan, said it was the best law he ever signed into law. Remember that? And that is what I do. I look at a problem and I find solutions. I went to Afghanistan 4 times as secretary. I found out that poor women and children, because of the Taliban, Al-Qaeda would not allow women to practice medicine. So a poor woman had to go when she had a cesarean or a complex pregnancy, had to go and they had to bring a male doctor into the hospital. And there was no place in the hospital that I visited where doctors could scrub up. And so the infection, maternal death of children was overwhelming. And I said, as secretary, we got to do something. I came back to Washington and I raised $2 million to rebuild the Rabia Baki Hospital for women and children. several of the secretaries donated money. Don Rumsfeld wrote out a big check. And we went there and we rebuilt it. I opened it up in the spring of 2004. There were 750 women in that audience who could not speak English. Were there to thank me for the first time to have a woman, they have a women's hospital dedicated to them, to take care of themselves and their children. And then I brought doctors over to my department to teach doctors how to deliver children safely and babies. And so you look at my record has always been one that looks at a problem and comes up with a solution. I've done it for all the time that I was there. And when you grow up as poor as I did, I went away to the university with 2 shirts and 1 sweater and a Thompson grocery bag, and several of you have been just as poor as I was. And you always remember, I believe, where you come from. And so as long as I'm in a position of power, or for that matter, I even do it when I'm in the business world, I provide many charitable things like several of you, if not all of you do. You know, it's easy to talk about it, but it's much better when you reach in your back pocket and take money out and contribute. And that's what I do. And I know you do the same thing. So it's how you live. The programs you come up, I would match my programs against anybody for helping poor get out of poverty and have an opportunity to live the American dream. I was given that opportunity, and that's why I'm running for the United States Senate.
Our constitutional question focuses on the Second Amendment. With the Second Amendment being such a strong part of our nation's culture today, how can we and how does the federal government attempt to prevent the kind of tragedies that took place in Aurora, Colorado and in Oak Creek?
You don't do it by gun control. You just don't. I mean, every one of those individuals that did it, the person in Aurora, Colorado, had mental problems. I mean, they wouldn't even let him on campus because he had mental problems. No matter how many gun control pieces of legislation we have, truth of the matter is, it wouldn't have helped one bit. He bought the guns and he went into it. There was a sign there that said there was no weapons available. No weapons should go in there. And the theater was supposed to have a magnetometer put up. That was the law. It didn't. And see, that individual also had huge mental problems. And no matter how many gun control pieces of legislation, if a person is intent, has got mental problems, is impaired, they do just about anything to wreak havoc on somebody, no matter how many laws you have. What we have to do is do something about mental health, and more about getting people that have it. You know, we've always in this country been somewhat reluctant. 2 things we've been reluctant about. And we've got to be willing to talk about it. Number one is death. We're very, very reluctant to talk about death. I can see some of you, you know. They tied up the United States Congress for 4 weeks over whether or not a person should be able to. Terry Schiavo, if you remember the case. I asked the president of the University of Texas once to set up a program, a master's program in the medical school to talk about death. The medical school dean thought that was a great idea. The president said, absolutely not. The second thing we don't like to talk about in this country is mental health. And if we really want to be honest, every single one of us has got some mental problems. You know, we won't talk about it, but the truth of the matter is, we need to talk about emotional stress, post-traumatic stress, and mental health. And so, before we start passing laws that really are not going to accomplish the objective, I think we should look at the problem and find ways in which we can really deal with mental health and deal with end of life. 28% of the cost of Medicare, just think of this, 28% of the cost of Medicare goes in the last 6 months of a person's life. You know why? Grandpa or grandma is on their deathbed. And grandson and granddaughter haven't talked to them for 3 years, but they come home and feel guilty. And they go into the doctor and say, well, give them a heart transplant, give them everything because grandpa and grandma deserve it. They feel guilty, and that's the problem. What we have to do is we have to allow for doctors and families to communicate much better about the end of life. And that's the area we're going to go. So I don't believe in increasing laws to not solve a problem. I want to find a solution to the problems and then move forward. I think it's a much better way to go.
Some international issues that are a concern of many people these days. One is Iran. And
Absolutely.
the concern about if Israel attacks Iran to thwart a nuclear weapon development. We hear that concern and that possibility. The U.S. government has a role to play in those attacks.
What do you mean the government has?
If Israel attacked Iran, should that be a joint effort with the United States military?
Well, of course. I've been to Israel 4 times. I received the Friend of Israel Award from Teddy Kollek, mayor of Jerusalem. You were with me. I received the Friend of Zion Award from Benjamin Netanyahu. I have come here with Ariel Sharon until midnight, talking about the 6-day war. I have been with my friend here from Israel and Prime Minister Rabin's office, where I received the Friend of Israel Award. Why did I receive it? I had a friend by the name of Marty Stein. We went to Israel on a trade mission. And Marty asked me to buy $10 million worth of Israeli bonds, the first governor of the United States to do that. And I did it. And I became a student and a friend of Israel. And I look at the Middle East today. The United States has one clear ally in the Middle East. That country is Israel. Small. If you haven't been there, you don't realize how small it is. Israel has bombs and missiles on a regular basis going into their country, more than is ever reported. And they have to have a huge protection, need the most modern Army and Air Force possible. Now we got a guy up in Iran by the name of Ahmadinejad, who, like the gentleman from Aurora, Colorado, and the gentleman possibly that raised the havoc on the Sikhs, a person that does not believe in the Holocaust, a person that believes that if he is able to get a nuclear bomb, and he has said this, we will wipe out the country of Israel. Now, he's also threatened to close the Gulf of Hormuz for all of oil industry. Now, we can sit back and allow Israel to do it alone. And Israel probably cannot do it alone. And sooner or later, we're going to have to go in there, because if he does close the Straits of Hormuz, it wrecks the world's economy. And the United States cannot be part of it. So it's much better to draw the red line that Benjamin Netanyahu is talking about and having severe sanctions. And I would go one step further. I would tell countries that are trading with Iran that you have a choice. If you trade with Iran, you don't trade with the United States of America. If you want to trade with the United States, you have a choice. If you're going to continue to go against the sanctions that we've placed and trade with Iran, no more trade with the United States. That is tough. That is what needs to be done. And that is why AIPAC has endorsed me. AIPAC has come out and has been given tremendous amount of support for me. Maybe not endorsement, is not the right word, but tremendous support. And wants me elected because they have said I have the best position paper on Israel and Iran, and my opponent has got one of the worst. And So it's very simple. If you want to be able to contain Iran, you cannot let them have a nuclear bomb. And the United States has got to protect its democratic friend and be able to deal with this problem now. And the red line that Netanyahu was talking about is the right one.
All right, our time is limited, so applause are appreciated. I'm sure if you hold off, then you'll get more time to hear more answers. The next two questions have to do with Israel, beyond the Iran question. The first, and I'll give you both and you can answer them. One is, how would you define what it means for the United States to be a good friend to Israel, beyond Iran? And the other is, what kind of support should the United States be giving to Palestinians in Israel?
What we have to do there is we have to be able to negotiate with no preconceived motives or reasons. We have to allow for that. We need a non-militarized zone for Palestine, for a Palestine state, and we need a separate Israeli state that people recognize and accept without preconceived opinions, and we have to make sure that Israel is protected. The United States has got to provide foreign trade. We got to expand trade. When I was secretary, for instance, one example, I went and I met with the owners of Teva, the pharmaceutical company in Israel, and they had just built a new plant. And the plant could not be open because FDA did not want to go to Israel and inspect it. I came back and sent them over there to Teva, and they inspected the plant, and Teva opened it up, and Teva's president sent me a letter and says, thank you. They have been waiting for 3 years, and after I sent them over there, they were opened up in 3 months, and they gave me tremendous thanks and gratitude for doing that. I tell you that as part of the answer because we need to expand trade. Teva is a huge supplier of generic drugs for the world, but also the United States. We've got to be able to continue those trades. We've got to make sure our foreign aid really appreciates our friends and gives them the necessary advances that they need. We got to. That's not a safe area over there. I was also there the day that Private Shalit got kidnapped. I was in Israel on that particular day. And those individuals that want to annihilate Israel, the Jewish people, we have got to be able, as Americans, stand up and say, they need our aid, they need our trade, they need our armaments, and they need our friendship. And I have been in that category for all the years that I've been in public life.
In terms of supporting the Palestinians, because there's a large lobby in this country that will be trying to influence you as a senator to support Israel, perhaps at the expense of Palestine. There's a people there that also is asking the United States to give it some support and feeling that the United States goes in support too. How do you balance those two very strong calls?
First, you allow for the negotiations to go. Allow Israel to negotiate with the Palestinians and allow the United States to do it and encourage it. But I want to tell you a little story. When I was Secretary of Health, I was on the board of directors of the World Health Organization. And we set up a program with Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Egypt, and several other Arabic countries. And about exchanging medical expertise and hospital. Now, because Israel was there, they would not allow Israel to be the chairman of the committee. And because Israel didn't want an Arab country to be the president, so they asked me to be the chairman. So every year at the World Health coalition, we would have a meeting between Israel and approximately 8 Arab states. And we would talk about health care. And we also set up exchange programs so Palestinians could go into Israeli hospitals and be taken care of by Israeli doctors. We started this in 2000, and I was chairman of that. And it met successfully every year thereafter. And if you give people with good intentions and humanitarian instincts to really want to do what is right and not be bogged down by ideology and years of hatred, you can accomplish great things. It was absolutely amazing for me to sit in that room, be the chairman, but listen to the give or take. We had to have two sides, the Arab side and the Israeli side, and I sat right in the middle. But to talk about how they were treating each other was absolutely amazing. And afterwards, they wouldn't shake hands coming in, but they all shook hands. We all had a joint picture afterwards, and everybody was talking because one major thing: health and welfare for their people. And the Palestinians needed the Israelis, and the Israelis were reaching out to say, well, give it to them. Let's cooperate. It was a thing of beauty, ladies and gentlemen, and I was there. I witnessed it for 4 straight years while I was secretary, chairing that. It was too bad that we didn't have more meetings because they wanted more meetings to discuss how they could build and grow on that partnership. But every year we had to start over with the same baby steps, but by the end, we were doing things, and they were sharing hospitals and things. But then things have broken down since I've left, and they don't do that. But it was fantastic while I was there, because I could see tremendous progress. And that's what we have to do. It's not only Palestinian, it's Jordan, it's Syria, all those countries. If you can use health care, I'm a big believer that in medical diplomacy. I believe that if you deal with countries on medical diplomacy, you can accomplish great things. And I saw it, I witnessed it between the Palestinians and Israelis, how much they wanted to cooperate and work. They also wanted to set up a program to teach each other about health care, about doctors. And that is what is the area we have to get to in our society. And I believe that America, if they used its power on medical diplomacy, which I started when I was secretary, it would be the biggest boom for foreign relations we ever had, to break down the barriers and get people talking. Because there isn't a place I've been in this world that mothers don't recognize the importance of health care for themselves and their children. Did it in Afghanistan, I saw it in Saudi Arabia, saw it in Iraq, saw it in Palestine. And if we can get women to start talking to each other in different countries and have America start putting aid in for medical diplomacy, we're going to make progress. And that's where we have to go for the Palestinians, for everybody else.
One of the follow-ups to the healthcare question in this country, I guess you call it the domestic medical diplomacy, has to do with, what are your thoughts about how the uninsured should be covered? The Affordable Care Act is taken out and restructured. You've got a 10-point plan on the website we talked about. We talked about some of it here. Mm-hmm. What's the role of the government in getting uninsured coverage?
Well, first off, you have to create jobs. You have to, you're not going to be able to, the United States is broke. So you've got to be able to start growing our economy. And the best way to do that is, like I said, bring $1 trillion back and start a stimulus program. Get people employed. Allow individuals to be able to do it. Those people don't have it. We have to set up a more streamlined and a better Medicaid program, because that is the safety net in America. It takes care of everybody. And it too has got some problems, and I got ideas on how I can fix it. But I think Romney mentioned the name at the during the debate, saying that Tommy Thompson had the best innovative, only one he mentioned, had the best innovative idea on Medicaid in the country. And that's what we have to do. But first, jobs. Grow the economy, and then for the safety net, let's do something innovative like I was articulating when I was Secretary of Health and Human Services on Medicaid, and what Romney mentioned that Democrats and Republicans both supported.
A lot of people believe that when we come to healthcare, the way to put it together is to have a national healthcare single payer.
That's what Tammy Baldwin wants with national healthcare.
We've talked about it, you don't agree with it.
Oh, I don't agree with it all.
What's wrong with
Let me tell you about national. Okay, I'll tell you about it. Do you all know Kate Zeisky, who used to be my revenue secretary? And she also ran for statewide office. Her mother and father, Mr. and Mrs. Zeisky, live in Shawnee. And they have a cottage in Conover, Canada. And they were up there 3 weeks ago, and she was tacking a picture on the wall of their cabin, or cottage, or whatever it is, condominium. And she fell off the chair, 8 o'clock in the morning, and broke her hand. Her husband rushed her to the emergency room in Conover Hospital, emergency hospital. Got there at 9, checked in at 9 o'clock in the morning. Accident at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. No food in this ward. And they didn't want to go out and get any because they're afraid they'd lose their place in line. And so at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they went up and said, "Did you forget about us? We're Americans, did you forget about us?" "Oh, no, we're going to still get to you." And at 7 o'clock, 11 hours after the accident, 10 hours after they got to Conover Emergency Room Hospital, they went in and had an x-ray and put in a cast. It's a true story. 3 weeks ago in Canada. That's nationalized health care. How many of you in this room would stand still for that? None of you would. No American would. But that's health care Canadian stuff. Now, I'm not saying that happens every day, but everybody. But that's one example of the delay that you have in getting proper health care. Americans want immediacy. They want health care taken over. They also want to choose who their doctor is and who their hospital is. My opponent wants the federal government to make those decisions. I want you. Huge difference. And I believe, even though our healthcare system certainly can be improved, and I laid out, I got 10 points that you can look up on the webpage, and I give you several of them this morning. We can do it. We can make healthcare affordable and accessible in America. And that's what America wants. And I am the best person to deliver it. Because as I said, I really understand healthcare.
Our last question for you this morning, just tight to our schedule of time, and I invite all of you to come back next Sunday. We'll do this again at 10:30 with Congresswoman Tammy Baldwin, and you're all welcome to come back. And we'll ask the same questions along with some of your questions, which we have gotten to today, and I appreciate you writing them out for me. The last question, and you can answer it and wrap up a little bit as well, too, is people are concerned today about the political climate in Washington and Congress. And we hear from candidates, well, you know, I can work across the aisle, and I know what it is to be bipartisan. What issue or issues, if you get to the U.S. Senate, do you refuse to compromise? If this is going to be Tommy Thompson, you're going to do what you want to do with this issue because you believe in it, and there isn't compromise for you.
Well, first of all, let's talk about bipartisanship. I was governor for 14 years, ladies and gentlemen. 12 and a half of those 14 years, Democrats controlled both parties. I epitomized what you can get accomplished with bipartisanship. Democrats were in control for 12 and a half out of those 14 years. And what did we do? We cut taxes 91 times. We reformed welfare. We reformed the economy. We built Wisconsin. And Wisconsin was never stronger or more economically viable than it was when I was governor. And I did it with Democratic voters. How did I do it? I sat down with Democrats and said, we have a problem. This is my vision for the future of Wisconsin. And I said, I need your help. No, we can have a stalemate. I had to veto a lot of things. But the truth of the matter is, we reached an accommodation, an agreement. They knew how far I could go. I knew how far they could go. And strange as it may seem, if you really treat people nicely, and you don't care who really gets the credit, you can make a tremendous lot of progress. I did that. And I think it was a real breakthrough in bipartisanship in the state of Wisconsin. I think right now, one of the reasons I'm running is the federal government is broken, badly. You have Republicans way to the right, Democrats way to the left, nobody talks. I'm going to Washington, ladies and gentlemen, because I believe I can make a difference. And people say, well, you're too old. You're 70 years old. I said, well, yeah, but I can do 50 push-ups. Can anybody else do 50 push-ups? I'm up to 60, by the way, right now. And I said to people, you know, if I do my job right, if people do their job right, they'll never get reelected because they're going to have to do what is necessary to make this country work. And I have ideas. I have bipartisanship. And I can bring people together. I've done it my whole life. And that's what Washington needs. You don't need somebody to go out there. As you know, when I first ran for governor, they said I was too conservative. And then when I ran this time, they said I was not conservative enough. Remember that? What does that tell you? It tells you I'm there to get the job done. And that's the only reason I'm running. I don't need this job. I do not need anything more on my resume. I've already accomplished more than anybody from Elroy ever thought I could. So I'm going there for one reason only, to make government work, solve Americans' problems, and that is what I believe the vast majority of the people of this state want.
Governor Thompson, thank you very much for taking the time to come down to us. Realize that round of applause not only for Tommy Thompson, for all of you, because our system works not because they're candidates who run and get elected or don't get elected. That's part of it. But part of it is that you take the time to get out and get involved, and that you ask questions, you listen to the answers, you think through this, you talk about it, not just here, but you take what you heard today and tell other people about it. And you come back next week, you go on the internet, read his website plans, go to Tammy Baldwin's site, read her plans. Because if you're informed and you go out and you vote, then the system works, not just because you can, but because of you. So again, a round of applause again because you can. Again, thank you all very much.